Left to die in freezing temperatures, a German shepherd's eyes filled with tears as she made one final plea for help. But on that bitter winter night, fate had other plans, and what happened next would change both her life and her savior's forever. The bitter wind howled through the abandoned industrial district on the outskirts of Berlin, where forgotten warehouses stood like silent sentinels in the darkness. Among the shadows, a figure trembled, not from the cold that bit through the winter air, but from exhaustion and pain that had become her constant companions. Luna, a once proud German shepherd, now lay curled against a rusted dumpster, her matted fur offering little protection against the merciless December night. Her story began like many others, a family pet, cherished and loved, until circumstances changed. But Luna's tale took a darker turn when her elderly owner passed away, leaving her in the care of relatives who saw her as nothing more than an inconvenience. The bright eyes that once sparkled with joy now dulled with each passing day of neglect, until finally they decided she wasn't worth the trouble anymore. Left to die in freezing temperatures, a German shepherd's eyes filled with tears as she made one final plea for help. But on that bitter winter night, fate had other plans, and what happened next would change both her life and her savior's forever. The bitter wind howled through the abandoned industrial district on the outskirts of Berlin, where forgotten warehouses stood like silent sentinels in the darkness. Among the shadows, a figure trembled, not from the cold that bit through the winter air, but from exhaustion and pain that had become her constant companions. Luna, a once proud German shepherd, now lay curled against a rusted dumpster, her matted fur offering little protection against the merciless December night. Her story began like many others, a family pet, cherished and loved, until circumstances changed. But Luna's tale took a darker turn when her elderly owner passed away, leaving her in the care of relatives who saw her as nothing more than an inconvenience. The bright eyes that once sparkled with joy now dulled with each passing day of neglect, until finally they decided she wasn't worth the trouble anymore. They drove her to this desolate place, far from the warmth of the home she'd known, and left her with nothing but confusion and heartbreak. Days turned into weeks as Luna wandered the industrial wasteland, scrounging for whatever scraps she could find, her once muscular frame becoming gaunt and weak. The proud arch of her back now curved in defeat, and her confident gait had deteriorated into a painful limp, the result of an untreated injury that worsened with each passing day. Tonight was different, though. The temperature had plummeted, far below freezing, and Luna could feel her strength ebbing away with each labored breath. The frost had begun to crystallize on her fur, and her paws burned from the icy ground. She had sought shelter behind the dumpster, but the metal only seemed to radiate more cold into her trembling body. As darkness fell, Luna's thoughts drifted to warmer days, the feeling of gentle hands scratching behind her ears, the sound of her elderly owner's kind voice, the comfort of a soft bed by a warm fireplace. These memories only made her current reality more painful. She let out a whimper that echoed through the empty streets, a sound that carried all the weight of her desperation. The few people who had passed by in recent weeks had hurried past, averting their eyes from the sight of the suffering dog. Luna had learned not to hope anymore, not to lift her head expectantly at the sound of approaching footsteps. Yet something inside her, some last spark of survival, wouldn't let her give up completely. The wind picked up, driving needles of ice through her fur. Luna tucked her nose under her tail, trying to conserve what little warmth remained in her body. Her breathing had become shallow, and a fog was settling over her mind. In these moments, as consciousness began to slip away, she made one last attempt to call for help, a mournful howl that rose above the wind's whistle, carrying with it every ounce of pain and longing in her breaking heart. The sound echoed off, the warehouse walls disappearing into the night like so many before it. But this time, something was different. This time, someone was listening. Through the haze of her fading awareness, Luna heard footsteps crunching in the snow. Footsteps that, unlike all the others, were growing closer rather than hurrying away. As her eyes began to close, a shadow fell across her hiding place. The footsteps had stopped, and in that moment, as consciousness slipped away, Luna felt something she hadn't experienced in what seemed like forever. The gentle touch of a human hand. Sarah Klein hadn't planned to walk home that night. As a veterinary student working late shifts at the local animal clinic, she usually took the bus back to her small apartment. But tonight, something had compelled her to decline her co-worker's offer of a ride and brave the cold instead. Perhaps it was the need to clear her head after a particularly difficult day at the clinic, or maybe it was something more, a pull she couldn't quite explain. The industrial district wasn't her usual route home, but road work had forced her to take this detour through the maze of abandoned warehouses and empty lots. The streetlights cast eerie shadows across the snow-covered ground, and her breath formed clouds in the frigid air. Sarah pulled her coat tighter around herself, quickening her pace as the wind cut through her layers of winter clothing. It was then that she heard it, a sound that made her freeze in her tracks. A howl, but unlike any she'd heard before. In her years of working with animals, Sarah had learned to read the meanings behind their vocalizations. This wasn't just any cry. It was a plea filled with such raw pain and desperation that it made her heart clench. Most people would have hurried past, eager to escape the cold and the darkness. But Sarah wasn't most people. She had dedicated her life to healing animals, and something in that cry spoke to the very core of her being. Without hesitation, she turned toward the sound, her phone's flashlight cutting through the darkness as she searched between the warehouses. The beam of light swept across empty loading docks and frost-covered dumpsters until it finally caught a glimpse of fur. There, huddled in the shadows, lay a German shepherd so still that for a moment Sarah's heart stopped. But then she saw the faintest rise and fall of the dog's chest, and hope surged through her. As she approached, Sarah's trained eye took in the details that told the dog's story. The matted fur, the protruding ribs, the awkward angle of one leg that suggested an old injury. This wasn't a stray that had recently lost its way. This was an animal that had been suffering for weeks, maybe months. "Hey there, sweet girl," Sarah whispered, keeping her voice soft and gentle as she slowly closed the distance between them. The dog didn't raise her head or show any sign of fear, a worrying sign that told Sarah just how weak she had become. Carefully, she removed her thick winter coat, ignoring the bite of the cold against her skin. With movements born from years of handling traumatized animals, she draped the coat over the German shepherd's freezing body. As her hands made contact with the dog's fur, she felt how cold she was. Dangerously cold. The veterinary student in her began a rapid assessment: severe hypothermia, malnutrition, possible internal injuries. The clinic was closed for the night and the nearest emergency vet was across town. Time was not on their side. Sarah made a quick decision. Pulling out her phone, she dialed a number she knew by heart. "Dr. Martinez, I'm so sorry to call this late, but I have an emergency." She quickly explained the situation, her eyes never leaving the German shepherd's face. As she spoke, she noticed something that made her voice catch. Despite the dog's weakened state, a single tear had frozen on her fur, catching the light of the phone like a tiny diamond. Dr. Martinez's response was immediate and characteristic of the mentor who had taught Sarah everything she knew about emergency veterinary care. "Bring her to my house. I'll have everything ready." Sarah ended the call and turned her attention back to the immediate challenge: how to transport an injured German shepherd through the frozen streets of Berlin. Looking into the dog's eyes, Sarah made a promise that would change both their lives. "Forever. I don't know what happened to you, girl, but it's over now. You're not alone anymore. We're going to fight this together." The next 30 minutes were a blur of desperate action and determination. Sarah had managed to fashion a makeshift stretcher from her coat, carefully sliding it under the German shepherd's limp body. Every step through the snowy streets felt like an eternity, with Sarah constantly checking the dog's breathing and maintaining contact to share what body heat she could. Dr. Elena Martinez lived in a modest house just outside the city center, its basement converted into a fully equipped emergency veterinary space for special cases. As Sarah approached, carrying her precious cargo, the front door flew open. Dr. Martinez stood silhouetted in the warm light, her silver hair pulled back in a hasty bun, wearing medical scrubs over her pajamas. "Straight downstairs," she commanded, leading the way to the basement clinic. The space was already prepared, examination table cleaned, heating pads warming, and IV fluids ready. As they transferred the German shepherd onto the table, Dr. Martinez's experienced hands began their assessment. "Her core temperature is dangerously low," she muttered, more to herself than to Sarah. "Start the warmed fluids while I check for other injuries." Sarah worked with practiced efficiency, finding a vein in the dog's leg despite her severely dehydrated state. As the warm fluids began to flow, she watched the gentle rise and fall of the German shepherd's chest, willing each breath to continue. Dr. Martinez moved methodically, her fingers probing for injuries beneath the matted fur. "Multiple old injuries," she reported, her voice tight with controlled anger. "This leg was broken and never set properly. There's evidence of long-term malnutrition, and these marks here." She gestured to several spots on the dog's body, suggest she was kept in some kind of confined space for extended periods. Sarah felt her throat tighten as the dog's story became clearer. Working in veterinary medicine, she'd seen cases of neglect before, but something about this one felt different. Perhaps it was the way the German shepherd had looked at her with those soulful eyes, or maybe it was the quiet dignity she maintained even in her desperate state. The next few hours were critical. They worked in tandem, monitoring vital signs, administering medications, and slowly raising the dog's body temperature. Dr. Martinez had connected her to various machines that beeped steadily in the background, each sound a reminder that they were fighting against time. Around 3 in the morning, as they were changing one of the warming blankets, the German shepherd's eyes fluttered open. For a moment, there was fear in those amber depths. But as Sarah leaned in close, speaking softly, something changed. The dog's tail moved slightly, just the faintest wag, but it spoke volumes. "She's a fighter," Dr. Martinez said, checking the latest readings. "But we're not out of the woods yet. The next 24 hours will be crucial." She looked at Sarah, who hadn't left the dog's side for hours. "You should get some rest. I can monitor her." But Sarah shook her head. "I want to stay if that's okay. I made her a promise." She reached out to gently stroke the dog's ear and was rewarded with another small tail wag. Dr. Martinez smiled knowingly. She'd seen that look before, the moment when a veterinarian's professional dedication transformed into something more personal. "Very well," she conceded, pulling up another chair. "But first, tell me everything about how you found her. Every detail could be important for her treatment." As Sarah recounted the events of the night, Dr. Martinez took notes, occasionally glancing at their patient with a thoughtful expression. The German shepherd drifted in and out of consciousness, but each time she opened her eyes, they sought out Sarah's face. Something was building between them, a bond forged in the crucible of this long night of survival. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. As dawn began to paint the basement windows with pale light, Sarah realized that her life had changed irrevocably. Whatever happened next, she knew she would be there to see this brave dog through every step of her recovery. As morning light filtered through the basement windows, the atmosphere in Dr. Martinez's makeshift clinic had shifted from crisis management to cautious optimism. The German shepherd's vital signs had stabilized, her body temperature returning to normal ranges. Sarah, still sitting beside the examination table despite her exhaustion, noticed subtle changes in her patient's demeanor. The slight relaxation in her muscles, the easier breathing, the more frequent tail wags when spoken to. During one of their monitoring checks, Dr. Martinez made an unexpected discovery. "Sarah, come look at this," she called, carefully parting the fur around the dog's neck. Beneath the matted mess, barely visible, was a faded tattoo, a series of numbers and letters that had almost completely disappeared with time and neglect. "A breeding kennel registration," Dr. Martinez explained. Her brow furrowed as she examined the marking more closely. "This is an old German system, used mainly for pedigree documentation. Our friend here has a history, and probably a name." She straightened up, reaching for her phone. "I know someone at the Berlin Kennel Registry who owes me a favor. Let me make a call." While Dr. Martinez stepped away to make her inquiries, Sarah began the delicate task of cleaning their patient. With warm water and gentle hands, she worked through the tangles and dirt, speaking softly all the while. "You're doing so well, sweet girl. Such a brave dog. We're going to figure out your story, I promise." As if understanding the words, the German shepherd lifted her head slightly, pressing it against Sarah's hand. It was a small gesture, but one that spoke volumes about the trust already building between them. Sarah had treated many animals during her veterinary training, but something about this dog touched her soul in a way she couldn't explain. Dr. Martinez returned about an hour later, her expression a mix of satisfaction and sadness. "Her name is Luna," she announced, consulting her notes. "She was born at the von Heidelberg Kennels 6 years ago, sold to a private owner, an elderly gentleman named Klaus Weber." She paused, her voice softening. "Mr. Weber passed away 4 months ago." The pieces began falling into place. Sarah looked at Luna with new understanding, imagining the trauma of losing her beloved owner and everything that had followed. "What happened after Mr. Weber died?" she asked, though she dreaded hearing the answer. "That's where the official record ends," Dr. Martinez replied. "But I did some digging. Mr. Weber's son inherited the house and all its contents, including Luna. According to neighbors I spoke with, the son wasn't interested in keeping her. They reported seeing Luna in the backyard for a few weeks after Mr. Weber's death, but then she disappeared." Sarah's hand tightened protectively on Luna's fur. "They just abandoned her? Left her to die in that industrial wasteland?" The anger in her voice caused Luna to whimper softly, and Sarah immediately gentled her touch, murmuring apologies. "Unfortunately, it happens more often than we'd like to think," Dr. Martinez said grimly, "but knowing her background helps us understand her medical needs better. Luna was well cared for most of her life. That's evident in her bone structure and dental health. The neglect is recent, which gives us hope for a full recovery." As if to confirm this assessment, Luna managed to lift her head again, this time holding it up long enough to make eye contact with both her caregivers. There was something different in her gaze now, a spark of her old self beginning to shine through the trauma. "She's asking us not to give up on her," Sarah whispered, fighting back tears. "And we won't, will we, Luna?" The name felt right on her tongue, like she'd been waiting to say it all along. Luna's tail thumped weakly against the table. Once, twice, 3 times. A definitive answer. Dr. Martinez watched this interaction with knowing eyes. In her decades of veterinary practice, she'd learned to recognize the moments when healing became about more than just medicine. What she was witnessing between Sarah and Luna was something special, a mutual rescue, though perhaps Sarah didn't realize it yet. "The legal implications of this situation are complex," she said carefully, "but for now, let's focus on getting her stronger. One step at a time." She checked Luna's IV lines and adjusted her medications. "Though I have a feeling, I know where she'll be staying once she's well enough to leave here." Sarah didn't respond immediately, but her hand never left Luna's fur, and her eyes held a determination that said everything needed saying. The sun continued to rise outside, marking the beginning of not just a new day, but a new chapter in both their lives. 3 days had passed since Luna's rescue, each hour marking small but significant victories in her recovery. The basement clinic had become a sanctuary of healing, with Sarah splitting her time between her regular clinic duties and caring for Luna. Dr. Martinez had arranged for her to take some emergency leave from her veterinary studies, understanding that this case was special. Today marked a crucial milestone in Luna's recovery, her first attempt at standing. The morning began with Sarah carefully massaging Luna's muscles, paying special attention to the leg that had been previously broken. Though the old injury had healed improperly, regular physical therapy could help strengthen the surrounding muscles to compensate. "Easy now, Luna," Sarah murmured, supporting the German Shepherd's weight as she helped her into a sitting position. Luna's eyes, now bright and alert, focused intently on Sarah's face, seeking reassurance. The trust between them had grown stronger with each passing day, built on countless small moments of gentle care and quiet companionship. Dr. Martinez entered the clinic, carrying a specialized harness designed to help injured dogs regain their mobility. "This should help distribute her weight more evenly," she explained, showing Sarah how to adjust the straps. "The key is to let her set the pace. She'll tell us when she's ready." As they fitted the harness, Luna remained perfectly still, as if understanding the importance of this moment. Her tail, which had become increasingly expressive over the past days, wagged slowly in anticipation. The transformation in her demeanor was remarkable. Where once there had been only despair, now there was a growing determination. The first attempt at standing was hesitant. Luna's legs trembled with the effort, and her injured limb barely touched the ground. Sarah and Dr. Martinez positioned themselves on either side, ready to provide support. "That's it, Luna," Sarah encouraged, her voice thick with emotion. "You can do this." Luna's ears perked forward at the sound of Sarah's voice, and something seemed to strengthen in her resolve. With a visible effort, she pushed herself up straighter, her good legs taking more of her weight. The injured leg hovered uncertainly, but then, slowly, her paw made contact with the floor. For a few precious seconds, Luna stood on all fours. Though her stance was uneven and her muscles quivered with exertion, the achievement was monumental. Sarah felt tears welling in her eyes as she witnessed Luna's courage. Dr. Martinez, typically professional and reserved, was beaming with pride. The moment was brief. Luna's strength gave out, and she carefully lowered herself back down. But there was no defeat in her expression, only a quiet satisfaction. She looked up at Sarah with eyes that seemed to say, "I'll do better next time." "Remarkable progress," Dr. Martinez noted, making entries in Luna's medical chart. "Her muscle tone is improving faster than I expected. The real challenge will be rebuilding strength in that injured leg, but—" She paused, observing how Luna leaned contentedly against Sarah's leg. "Something tells me she has all the motivation she needs." Sarah sat down beside Luna, scratching her favorite spot behind her ears. The German Shepherd's reaction to gentle touch had evolved from initial wariness to complete trust, her whole body relaxing into the affection. "You're amazing, you know that," Sarah whispered. "Such a brave girl." As the day progressed, they attempted standing several more times, each effort lasting a little longer than the last. Between attempts, Sarah worked with Luna on other exercises. Gentle stretches, range of motion movements, and massage techniques that Dr. Martinez had taught her. Luna participated in each activity with patient determination, her eyes never straying far from Sarah's face. During a quiet moment in the afternoon, as Luna dozed after her exercises, Dr. Martinez pulled Sarah aside. "I've been making some inquiries," she said softly, "about the legal aspects of Luna's situation, given the circumstances of her abandonment and with proper documentation of her condition when found." As she smiled at her student, "Let's just say I'm optimistic about your chances of giving her a permanent home." Sarah's heart leaped at these words, though she tried to maintain professional composure. She looked back at Luna, who had opened one eye at their whispered conversation. The German shepherd's tail began to wag, as if she too understood the significance of this discussion. A week had passed since Luna's first attempts at standing, and her progress had exceeded everyone's expectations. The basement clinic, while perfect for initial recovery, had begun to feel confining. Dr. Martinez had suggested that it was time for Luna to experience fresh air again, not the bitter cold that had nearly claimed her life, but the gentle warmth of early morning sunshine in Dr. Martinez's private garden. Sarah had spent the night before preparing for this milestone, anxiety mixing with excitement. She knew that for Luna, stepping outside would mean confronting memories of her abandonment. The garden might be safe and enclosed, but would Luna understand that? Would the open sky above trigger memories of those desperate weeks alone? "We'll take it slow," Dr. Martinez advised, as they prepared for the morning excursion. "The garden is secure, and we'll stay with her the entire time." She helped Sarah adjust Luna's harness, now a familiar comfort to the German shepherd. Luna's tail wagged steadily, picking up on the anticipatory energy in the room. The back door to the garden was accessed through a short hallway from the basement. Sarah walked alongside Luna, who had mastered a determined, if uneven, gait. The injured leg still didn't bear full weight, but Luna had learned to compensate, her spirit stronger than her physical limitations. At the doorway, Luna hesitated. Her nose worked overtime, sampling the scents drifting in from outside. Her ears swiveled, catching the morning songs of birds and the rustle of leaves. Sarah felt the slight tremor that ran through Luna's body, not from weakness this time, but from memory. "It's okay, sweet girl," Sarah murmured, kneeling beside her. "We're right here with you. No one's going to leave you again." She kept her voice steady, though her heart ached at the fear she saw flickering in Luna's eyes. Dr. Martinez stood quietly on Luna's other side, lending her calm presence to the moment. Luna took one step forward, then another. The morning. Sun caught her fur, which had regained much of its luster under Sarah's devoted care. Another step brought her fully outside, and she lifted her face to the sky, taking in the vastness above her. For a moment, Sarah held her breath, watching for signs of distress. But Luna surprised them both. Instead of cowering or trying to retreat, she moved forward with growing confidence. The garden, with its high walls and abundant plant life, seemed to awaken something in her, memories perhaps of happier days. She sniffed at a cluster of early spring flowers, her tail beginning to wave with genuine interest. Sarah and Dr. Martinez exchanged relieved smiles as they watched Luna explore. The German shepherd moved carefully from plant to plant, her natural curiosity overtaking her initial trepidation. When she discovered a patch of soft grass warmed by the morning sun, she looked back at Sarah with an expression that could only be described as hopeful. Understanding the unspoken request, Sarah helped Luna lower herself onto the grass. The simple pleasure of feeling the earth beneath her, of being outside in safety, seemed to transform Luna. She rolled slightly onto her side, letting the sun warm her belly, and released a deep sigh of contentment. Sarah sat down beside her, and Luna immediately shifted to rest her head in Sarah's lap, a gesture that had become their ritual of mutual comfort. Dr. Martinez, observing from a discreet distance, made notes in Luna's medical record, but her eyes were soft as she watched the pair. "This is a significant breakthrough," she said quietly. "Many dogs who've experienced abandonment develop severe anxiety about open spaces. But Luna—" She gestured to where the German Shepherd lay peacefully in the grass. "She's showing us that she's ready to trust again." Time seemed to slow in the peaceful garden. Luna dozed intermittently, but her ears remained alert to every sound, not in fear, but with healthy curiosity. When a butterfly fluttered near, she tracked its movement with interest, her tail thumping gently against the grass. Sarah found herself imagining future mornings like this, not in Dr. Martinez's garden, but in a place of their own. The legal paperwork for Luna's adoption was already in process, and Dr. Martinez's documentation of the rescue and recovery would support their case. The thought of giving Luna not just recovery, but a true home, filled Sarah with quiet joy. As the morning wore on, Luna showed no signs of wanting to return inside. Each minute in the sun seemed to restore something that had been lost during those dark weeks of abandonment. When she finally stood again, ready to continue exploring, her steps were steadier than ever before. She was moving forward, in every sense of the word. The morning Sarah brought the adoption paperwork to Dr. Martinez's clinic was filled with nervous energy. Luna, now able to move around with growing confidence, sensed her friend's excitement and followed her every movement with bright, attentive eyes. 2 weeks had passed since the rescue, and the transformation in Luna was nothing short of miraculous. "The adoption process won't be simple," Dr. Martinez warned, reviewing the stack of documents spread across her desk. "We're dealing with a registered pedigree dog whose original owner passed away. Even though Luna was abandoned, we need to handle this carefully." She shuffled through the papers, her expression serious but determined. Sarah sat in the chair opposite the desk, while Luna lay at her feet, her head resting protectively against Sarah's shoe. The bond between them had grown stronger with each passing day, making the idea of separation unthinkable. "What exactly do we need to do?" Sarah asked, her hand automatically reaching down to scratch behind Luna's ears. "First, we need to document everything," Dr. Martinez explained, pulling out her extensive medical records. "The condition we found her in, the treatment provided, the evidence of abandonment. I've already contacted the Berlin Animal Welfare Office, and they're sending an investigator to review the case." Luna's ears perked up at voices in the hallway, and moments later, a knock at the door announced the arrival of Frau Weber, the animal welfare investigator. She was a stern-looking woman with kind eyes, carrying her own stack of paperwork. As she entered, her gaze immediately went to Luna. "So this is our miracle dog," she said softly, kneeling down to Luna's level. To everyone's surprise, Luna didn't shy away. "Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time. So if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story." Instead, she lifted her head in a gesture that showed both dignity and trust, a far cry from the broken spirit they'd found in the industrial district. The next hour was spent going through the details of Luna's case. Dr. Martinez presented her medical evidence, photographs from the night of rescue, treatment records, documentation of old injuries. Sarah recounted the story of finding Luna, her voice catching as she described those first critical hours. Frau Weber took copious notes, occasionally asking questions but mostly listening intently. When she finally spoke, her voice was firm. "The abandonment case is clear. The previous owners forfeited their rights when they left her to die. However," she paused, reviewing her notes, "we still need to follow proper procedures. There will be a mandatory waiting period, home inspections, and evaluations of Luna's adjustment. Sarah's heart sank at the mention of a waiting period, but Luna, as if sensing her distress, pressed closer against her leg. Dr. Martinez quickly intervened. Luna can continue her recovery here while the process moves forward. Sarah has already proven herself more than capable of providing the care she needs. Frau Weber's expression softened as she watched the interaction between Sarah and Luna. "I can see that," she acknowledged, "and it works in your favor that you're a veterinary student with documented experience in animal care. Still, we need to do things by the book." The investigator then turned her attention to practical matters. "You'll need to prepare your home for a dog with special needs. Luna's old injury means she'll need accommodations, non-slip flooring, easy access to rest areas, possibly a ramp for any stairs." Sarah nodded eagerly. "I've already started making changes to my apartment. I've installed rubber mats for better traction, and my landlord has approved all the modifications." Her preparation brought a smile to both Dr. Martinez and Frau Weber's faces. As the meeting continued, Luna remained calm and attentive, occasionally touching Sarah's hand with her nose, a gesture that had become her way of offering comfort. Her behavior didn't go unnoticed by Frau Weber, who made several notes about the obvious bond between potential adopter and dog. "There's one more thing," Frau Weber said as she prepared to leave. "We'll need to attempt to contact the previous owners, Mr. Weber's son and his family. It's a formality given the circumstances, but it's required by law. They'll have an opportunity to explain their actions or claim Luna, though given the evidence of abandonment." She left the sentence unfinished, her disapproval clear. Sarah felt a flash of anger at the mention of the people who had abandoned Luna, but she kept her composure. Luna, however, pressed herself closer to Sarah's side, as if the mere mention of her former family brought back difficult memories. "How long?" Sarah asked quietly. "How long until we know for sure?" "The mandatory waiting period is 30 days, Frau Weber replied. "But given the circumstances and Dr. Martinez's documentation, we'll expedite the process as much as possible. In the meantime," she smiled, her official demeanor softening, "keep doing exactly what you're doing. Some matches are just meant to be." The day of Luna's first visit to Sarah's apartment arrived with a mix of anticipation and nervous energy. Dr. Martinez had deemed Luna strong enough for short trips, and the Animal Welfare Office had approved this next step in the adoption process. Sarah had spent the past week transforming her modest one-bedroom apartment into a space that would accommodate Luna's special needs. "Remember," Dr. Martinez advised as they prepared to leave the clinic, "this is a big step for her. New environments can be overwhelming, especially for a dog who's experienced trauma. Let her set the pace." She helped Sarah secure Luna's harness, which now bore a bright purple therapy dog in training patch, a suggestion from Frau Weber to help explain Luna's occasional unsteadiness to curious onlookers. The journey to Sarah's apartment was an adventure in itself. Luna had gotten better at walking, but the busy streets of Berlin presented new challenges. Each passing car, each stranger's voice, caused her ears to twitch and her body to tense. Sarah maintained a steady pace, speaking softly to Luna whenever she showed signs of stress. "You're doing so well, sweet girl," she murmured as they waited at a crosswalk. Luna pressed against her leg, watching the traffic with wary eyes but holding her ground. Several passers-by smiled at the pair, and one elderly woman stopped to comment on Luna's beautiful coat, which had regained its lustrous sheen under Sarah's care. The apartment building was only a 15-minute walk from the clinic, but they took nearly twice that time, allowing Luna to rest whenever she needed. The building's elevator proved to be an unexpected challenge. The enclosed space and unfamiliar movement caused Luna to flatten her ears in distress. Sarah sat on the floor with her during the brief ride to the third floor, stroking her fur. and praising her bravery. When Sarah finally opened her apartment door, she held her breath, watching Luna's reaction. The German shepherd stood in the doorway, her nose working overtime as she processed the new scents. Sarah had spent hours preparing the space, laying down non-slip mats, creating cozy corners with plush beds, and securing anything that might pose a hazard. Luna's first steps into the apartment were cautious but curious. She moved from room to room, her nails clicking softly on the protected hardwood floors. In the living room, she discovered the first of several beds Sarah had set up, this one positioned near a window that overlooked a small park. The sunlight streaming through created a perfect warming spot. Sarah followed at a distance, letting Luna explore at her own pace. In the kitchen, Luna's nose led her to a set of new food and water bowls, elevated to make eating easier with her injury. A drawer at dog height contained carefully selected toys and treats, ready for when Luna felt playful enough to use them. The bedroom proved to be the most interesting to Luna. Sarah had placed a memory foam dog bed next to her own, complete with a soft blanket that carried Sarah's scent. She'd been sleeping with it at the clinic to make it familiar. Luna approached the bed, sniffing it thoroughly before looking back at Sarah with questioning eyes. "That's yours if you want it," Sarah explained, sitting on the edge of her own bed. To her amazement, Luna carefully settled onto the memory foam, testing its support. The bed had been an expensive investment on a student's budget, but seeing Luna's contentment made it worth every penny. As the afternoon wore on, Luna began to show signs of truly relaxing. She moved between her favorite spots, the sun-warmed window bed, the kitchen where Sarah prepared a light meal, and finally back to the bedroom. Each time she returned to Sarah, her tail wagged a little more freely. Her eyes held a little more confidence. Sarah had set up a webcam to document the visit for Frau Weber, capturing Luna's careful exploration and growing comfort. There were moments that brought tears to her eyes, like when Luna discovered the toy basket and cautiously picked up a soft plush rabbit, carrying it to her bed as if asking permission to keep it. The most touching moment came as evening approached. Sarah sat on the floor, reviewing some veterinary texts, when Luna quietly approached and laid her head in Sarah's lap. It was a gesture of complete trust, one that said more clearly than words, "I feel safe here." Dr. Martinez had advised keeping the first visit short, but as the sun began to set, Sarah found herself reluctant to end this peaceful moment. Luna had exceeded all expectations, showing remarkable adaptability and trust. The apartment, once just Sarah's space, already felt different, warmer, more complete, with Luna in it. As they prepared to return to the clinic, Luna gave one last look around the apartment, her tail wagging gently. Sarah knelt beside her, wrapping her arms around the German shepherd's neck in a gentle hug. "Soon," she promised, her voice thick with emotion. "Soon this will be your home for good." The call from Frau Weber came on a quiet Tuesday morning, 3 weeks into the adoption process. Sarah was at the clinic, helping Luna with her daily physical therapy exercises, when Dr. Martinez appeared with an unusually grave expression. "They've found them," Dr. Martinez said quietly, holding her phone. "Mr. Weber's son and his wife. They're contesting the abandonment claim." The words fell like stones in the peaceful clinic atmosphere. Luna, sensitive to the sudden tension, stopped her exercises and pressed against Sarah's leg. Within an hour, they were seated in Dr. Martinez's office with Frau Weber, who looked both frustrated and determined. "They're claiming there was no abandonment," she explained, her voice tight with controlled anger. "According to their story, Luna escaped from their yard, and they've been searching for her ever since." Sarah's hand trembled as she stroked Luna's fur. The German shepherd had gone completely still, her ears flattened against her head. Whether she recognized the discussion of her former family or was simply reacting to the stress in the room, Her distress was evident. "That's impossible," Sarah protested, her voice cracking. "The state we found her in. The old injuries. She was deliberately left in that industrial district. She would have died if—" She couldn't finish the sentence. The memory of that cold night still too vivid. Frau Weber nodded grimly. "We have substantial evidence supporting the abandonment case. Dr. Martinez's medical documentation, photographs, witness statements from the industrial district workers who reported seeing a car drop off a dog matching Luna's description. But they're wealthy, well-connected, and they're demanding an immediate return of their lost property." The word property made Sarah flinch. Luna wasn't property. She was a living, feeling being who had suffered immensely. As if understanding the gravity of the moment, Luna lifted her head and met Sarah's eyes, her gaze filled with trust that made Sarah's heart ache. "There will be a hearing," Frau Weber continued, her voice softening as she watched the interaction between Sarah and Luna. "The Animal Welfare Office is taking this very seriously. We have strong evidence of neglect and abandonment, but we need to prepare for a fight." Dr. Martinez, who had been quietly observing, finally spoke. "I've contacted several colleagues who specialize in veterinary forensics. They're willing to testify about Luna's injuries and condition. The improperly healed leg alone shows a pattern of neglect that predates her abandonment." The next hour was spent discussing legal strategies and gathering evidence. Sarah listened with growing determination, her hand never leaving Luna's fur. The German Shepherd remained unusually quiet, but her body language spoke volumes. She stayed pressed against Sarah, occasionally turning to nuzzle her hand, as if offering comfort. "There's something else you should know," Frau Weber added hesitantly. "They're planning to visit the clinic tomorrow to identify Luna. We can't legally prevent this, but—" She looked directly at Sarah. "You should be prepared for Luna's reaction. It could be important evidence for our case." The thought of Luna facing her former owners made Sarah feel physically ill. How would the sensitive, recovering dog handle seeing the people who had abandoned her? Would it undo all the progress they'd made? Luna seemed to sense Sarah's distress, whining softly and placing her paw on Sarah's knee, a gesture she had developed to offer comfort. "I'll be here," Dr. Martinez assured them. "We'll document everything. If Luna shows signs of distress, we'll end the visit immediately. Her welfare comes first." She looked at her watch and added, "Sarah, why don't you take Luna to the garden for a while? She needs a break from all this tension, and frankly, so do you." In the peaceful garden, Sarah sat with Luna on their favorite patch of grass, trying to process the morning's events. The German Shepherd stretched out beside her, her head in Sarah's lap, offering the unconditional love that had become their mutual comfort. "I won't let them hurt you again," Sarah whispered, her voice fierce with protection. "I promise you that, Luna. Whatever it takes, we'll fight this together." Luna's tail wagged gently, her eyes never leaving Sarah's face. In that moment, despite the uncertainty ahead, their bond felt unshakable. The morning of the Webers' visit dawned grey and cold, reminiscent of the night Luna was found. Dr. Martinez had arranged for a veterinary behaviorist to be present, along with Frau Weber and a representative from the Animal Welfare Office's legal team. They gathered in the clinic's main examination room, which had been set up with cameras to document every moment of the interaction. Sarah sat on the floor with Luna, who was unusually subdued. The German Shepherd had made remarkable progress in recent weeks, but today she seemed to sense the gravity of what was coming. Her head rested heavily in Sarah's lap, her eyes fixed on the door with unusual intensity. "Remember," Dr. Martinez instructed, checking the camera positions one final time. "No one is to approach Luna directly. The Webers must remain by the door. We need to see Luna's natural reactions." She looked at Sarah with concern. "Are you sure you want to stay?" Before Sarah could answer, the sound of voices in the hallway made Luna's entire body go rigid. Her ears flattened against her head, and her breathing quickened. Sarah felt the tremor that ran through the dog's body, but what happened next surprised everyone. Instead of trying to hide, Luna shifted her position slightly, placing herself between Sarah and the door. Despite her obvious fear, she was attempting to protect the person who had saved her. The behaviorist made rapid notes, capturing this significant detail. The door opened, and Hans Weber entered with his wife, Angelica. They were exactly as Sarah had imagined, expensively dressed with an air of entitlement that seemed to fill the room. Hans's eyes narrowed as he took in the scene, lingering on Sarah with obvious disapproval. "Luna, come!" he commanded sharply, using German. The harsh tone made Luna flinch, but she didn't move. Instead, she pressed closer to Sarah, her body trembling but her position firm. "Please," Frau Weber interrupted, her voice professionally neutral, "remain by the door as agreed. We need to observe Luna's natural behavior." The Webers complied, but their frustration was evident. "Angelica," Weber spoke next, her voice artificially sweet. "Luna, sweetie, don't you remember us? We've been so worried about you." She took a step forward, ignoring the instructions to stay back. Luna's reaction was immediate and telling. She let out a low whimper, trying to make herself smaller, while maintaining her protective position in front of Sarah. The behaviorist's pen moved rapidly across her notepad, documenting every nuance of Luna's body language. "This is ridiculous," Hans Weber snapped. "She's clearly been turned against us. We demand our property be returned immediately." Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. He reached into his coat, pulling out Luna's old collar, a rigid metal one that made Dr. Martinez's expression darken. At the sight of the collar, Luna's reaction became even more pronounced. She began to shake uncontrollably, and a low, distressed whine escaped her throat. Sarah placed a gentle hand on her back, and Luna immediately pressed into the touch, seeking comfort. "I think we've seen enough," Dr. Martinez said firmly, stepping forward. "Luna's reaction clearly indicates severe trauma associated with your presence. This will be noted in our report to the court." "You can't possibly suggest this," Angelica began, but the behaviorist cut her off. "What I've observed," the specialist stated professionally, "is a dog showing clear signs of past trauma when confronted with former caretakers. Moreover, she's displaying protective behavior toward her current caregiver, despite her own fear. This indicates a strong, healthy bond formed through positive experiences." The Weber's facade began to crack. Hans's face reddened with anger, while Angelica's artificial sweetness dissolved into obvious frustration. "We have rights," Hans declared. "We'll take this to court. Yes," Frau Weber interrupted calmly. "You have the right to present your case in court, but for now, this visit is over. Luna's distress is evident, and as mandated by animal welfare regulations, we must prioritize her well-being." As the Webers were escorted out, their protests echoing down the hallway, Luna remained pressed against Sarah, shaking but steadfast. Only when the voices faded did she finally relax slightly, turning to bury her face in Sarah's lap. The behaviorist approached slowly, kneeling at a respectful distance. "In all my years of practice," she said quietly, "I've rarely seen such clear evidence of both past trauma and current positive attachment. Luna's behavior today speaks volumes about both her past and her present." Dr. Martinez was already reviewing the video footage. Every reaction, every flinch, every protective gesture, it's all documented. They may have money and connections, but they can't dispute what we've all witnessed here today. Sarah barely heard them. She was focused entirely on Luna, who had begun to recover her composure, but refused to leave Sarah's side. "You were so brave," she whispered, gently stroking Luna's ears. "So incredibly brave." Luna lifted her head, meeting Sarah's eyes with a gaze that seemed to hold both memory and hope. Then, in a gesture that brought tears to everyone's eyes, she gently licked Sarah's cheek, not in fear or submission, but in pure, unconditional trust. News of Luna's story spread through Berlin's animal welfare community like wildfire. What began as a private struggle suddenly became a rallying point for animal rights advocates across the city. The security camera footage from the industrial district, showing a car matching the Weber's vehicle abandoning Luna, had been discovered and sparked outrage on local social media. Sarah arrived at the clinic one morning to find a small group of supporters outside, holding signs with Luna's picture and messages of encouragement. Among them was Carl, one of the industrial district workers who had witnessed Luna's abandonment. He had come forward to formally testify about what he'd seen that night. "I couldn't sleep after seeing that poor dog left there," Carl told Sarah, his weathered face etched with concern. "I should have done something sooner, but I never imagined." He trailed off as Luna emerged from Dr. Martinez's car, walking with growing confidence despite her old injury. The German shepherd approached Carl cautiously, sniffing his extended and before allowing him to gently pat her head. Inside the clinic, Dr. Martinez's office had become a command center for Luna's legal defense. The walls were covered with timeline charts, medical documentation, and photographs showing Luna's transformation from the night of her rescue to the present. 3 different veterinary forensics experts had reviewed the case, and their reports painted a damning picture of long-term neglect. "The public support is helpful," Frau Weber explained during their morning meeting, "but the Weber's lawyers are pushing back hard. They're trying to paint this as a simple misunderstanding, claiming Luna escaped, and they've been searching for her all along." She shuffled through some papers on her desk. They're also questioning Sarah's motives, suggesting this was some kind of planned theft. Luna, who had been dozing in her favorite spot by Sarah's chair, lifted her head at the tension in Sarah's voice. She had developed an uncanny ability to sense when her human needed comfort, and now she pressed her nose into Sarah's hand, offering silent support. "We've received letters from other veterinarians in the area," Dr. Martinez added, pulling out a thick folder. "Apparently, the Webers brought Luna in for treatment at various clinics over the years, never returning to the same one twice. It's a common pattern among neglectful owners, avoiding follow-up questions about untreated injuries." The evidence was mounting, but so was the pressure. The Webers had hired one of Berlin's most prestigious law firms, and their influence in the city's social circles was considerable. Several wealthy clients had already withdrawn their pets from Dr. Martinez's care in apparent solidarity with the Webers. "I don't care about losing clients," Dr. Martinez said firmly, noticing Sarah's worried expression. "Some things are more important than money. Luna's case could set a precedent for how similar cases are handled in the future." As if understanding the gravity of the discussion, Luna stood up and made her way around the room, visiting each person in turn. She'd come so far from the terrified dog they'd found in the snow. Now she offered comfort to others, her gentle spirit shining through despite her traumatic past. The most touching support came from unexpected quarters. The elderly residents of the retirement home near Sarah's apartment, who had watched Luna's daily therapy walks with interest, had written a collective letter to the court. They described how Luna's presence in the neighborhood had brightened their days, how her journey inspired them, and how they'd witnessed her transformation under Sarah's care. "Your Honor," one resident had written, "I sit by my window each morning to watch this young woman and her dog pass by. The patience and love I see between them is remarkable. The dog, who once could barely walk, now stops to greet children and other dogs. She brings joy to our entire street. Isn't that what every animal deserves?" Sarah read these letters with tears in her eyes while Luna rested her head in her lap. Each day brought new challenges, meetings with lawyers, preparation for testimony, dealing with occasional hostile comments from Weber supporters, but it also brought new reasons to hope. The court date was set for the following week. As Sarah and Luna left the clinic that evening, they passed the spot where supporters had left a small memorial of flowers and dog toys. Luna paused, sniffing a stuffed animal someone had placed. There, then looked up at Sarah with clear, trusting eyes. "Whatever happens," Sarah promised, kneeling beside her, "we face it together." Luna's tail wagged gently, and she pressed her forehead against Sarah's, their special gesture of mutual trust and love. In that moment, despite the uncertainty ahead, their bond felt stronger than any legal challenge they might face. The morning of the court hearing arrived with a sense of gravity that seemed to hang in the air. The Berlin Animal Welfare Court, a special division dedicated to animal rights cases, was housed in an imposing stone building in the city center. Sarah arrived early, her professional attire a stark contrast to her usual clinic wear, with Dr. Martinez and their legal team beside her. Luna waited in a special room adjacent to the courtroom, where the behaviorist would monitor her stress levels. The German Shepherd had seemed to sense the importance of the day, maintaining a quiet dignity that moved even the court officers who came to check on her. Sarah had spent extra time that morning brushing Luna's coat until it gleamed, the physical transformation from the desperate dog they'd found in the snow now complete. "Remember," their lawyer Frau Schmidt advised as they prepared to enter the courtroom, "the Webers will try to paint themselves as victims. Stay calm, stick to the facts, and let the evidence speak for itself." She patted the thick binder of documentation they'd assembled, medical records, witness statements, security footage, and expert testimonies. The courtroom filled quickly. The Webers sat on one side with their expensive legal team, while the other side filled with supporters from the animal welfare community. Carl, the industrial worker, nodded encouragingly to Sarah as she took her seat. The elderly residents from her neighborhood had sent a representative, and several veterinarians from across Berlin sat ready to testify. Judge Hoffman, a stern-faced woman known for her fair handling of animal welfare cases, called the court to order. The Weber's lawyer spoke first, weaving a tale of a beloved family pet who had accidentally escaped, and devoted owners who had searched tirelessly for their precious Luna. Sarah's hands clenched in her lap as she listened to their version of events. But when it was their turn, the truth began to emerge in undeniable detail. Dr. Martinez presented her medical evidence with clinical precision, her photographs and X-rays telling a story of long-term neglect that made several spectators gasp. "The improperly healed fracture," Dr. Martinez explained, pointing to the evidence, "shows no sign of professional treatment. A dog in this condition would have been in considerable pain, yet no veterinary care was sought." She proceeded to detail every injury, every sign of neglect, building an irrefutable case. Carl's testimony about the night of abandonment was particularly damaging. "I saw the car pull up," he stated firmly. "They left her there in the freezing cold. I've worked in that district for 20 years. No one accidentally ends up there at that hour." The security footage played next, showing a car matching the Weber's vehicle entering and leaving the industrial district. The timestamp matched exactly with Carl's account. Hans Weber's face darkened as he watched, while his wife dabbed at her eyes with an expensive handkerchief. But the most compelling testimony came from the behaviorist who presented the video of Luna's reaction to the Weber's clinic visit. "In my 20 years of practice," she explained, "I've never seen such clear signs of trauma response to former owners. Contrast this with her current relationship with Ms. Klein." The court watched in silence as she played clips showing Luna's gentle interactions with Sarah, her progress in therapy, her growing confidence and trust. This is not just physical recovery, the behaviorist emphasized. This is emotional healing, possible only through consistent loving care. The Weber's lawyer tried to argue that Luna's behavior had been poisoned against them, but his arguments felt hollow against the weight of evidence. When he suggested that the Webers should at least be compensated for their property, Judge Hoffman's expression hardened visibly. "Animals are not mere property under current German law," she stated firmly. "They are living beings capable of suffering, and their welfare must be our primary concern." The final piece of evidence was Sarah's daily log of Luna's recovery, not just medical notes, but small observations about Luna's personality emerging as she healed. "She loves classical music," Sarah had written. "Her tail wags in time to Bach. Today she played with a toy for the first time. Her joy was beautiful to see." As the hearing drew to a close, Judge Hoffman asked one final question. "Ms. Klein, understanding the responsibility involved, are you prepared to provide for Luna's special needs for the rest of her life?" Sarah stood, her voice clear and steady. "Your Honor, Luna has taught me more about courage and forgiveness than I ever thought possible. She's not just a dog I saved. She saved me too, in many ways. We belong together." The courtroom waited in tense silence as Judge Hoffman reviewed her notes. Luna's fate hung in the balance, along with a precedent that could affect countless other animals in similar situations. Judge Hoffman's voice cut through the tense silence of the courtroom with quiet authority. "In cases involving animal welfare, we must consider not just ownership rights, but the fundamental well-being of the animal in question. The evidence presented today has painted a clear picture of both neglect and abandonment, followed by extraordinary care and rehabilitation." She paused, reviewing her notes one final time before continuing. "The security footage, medical evidence, and expert testimony leave no room for doubt. The Webers not only neglected Luna's medical needs over an extended period, but deliberately abandoned her in conditions that would likely have resulted in her death." Hans Weber shifted uncomfortably in his seat, while his wife's carefully maintained composure began to crack. Their lawyer started to rise, but Judge Hoffman's raised and silenced any potential interruption. "Furthermore," she continued, "the documented transformation of Luna under Ms. Klein's care demonstrates what proper treatment and genuine love can achieve. The contrast between Luna's reaction to her former owners and her current caregiver speaks volumes about her past experiences and present circumstances." Sarah held her breath, feeling Dr. Martinez's supportive hand on her shoulder. In the adjacent room, Luna had risen to her feet, as if sensing the gravity of the moment through the wall that separated them. "Therefore, it is the ruling of this court that all rights and responsibilities for Luna's care be immediately and permanently transferred to Sarah Klein. Additionally," Judge Hoffman's voice took on an edge of steel, "the court is referring evidence of animal cruelty to the prosecutor's office for potential criminal charges against the Webers." The courtroom erupted in muted celebrations from Luna's supporters. The elderly representative from Sarah's neighborhood wiped tears from her eyes, while Carl pumped his fist in quiet victory. The Webers' lawyer immediately began discussing appeal options with his clients, but their voices were drowned out by Judge Hoffman's continued ruling. "Ms. Klein, please approach the bench." Sarah stood on slightly shaky legs and walked forward. Judge Hoffman's stern expression softened slightly. "The court recognizes the extraordinary commitment you've shown to Luna's rehabilitation. You've set an example of what responsible pet ownership should look like. Do you understand the ongoing obligations you're accepting?" "Yes, Your Honor," Sarah replied, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "Luna and we're family now. Whatever she needs, for as long as she needs it, I'll be there." Judge Hoffman nodded, satisfied. "Then there's one more thing to do." She pressed a button on her desk, and a court officer opened the door to the adjacent room. Luna entered the courtroom with the behaviorist, her steps careful but confident. When she saw Sarah, her tail began to wag, and she made her way directly to her human side, ignoring the Webers completely. The bond between human and animal is a sacred trust, Judge Hoffman observed, watching as Luna pressed against Sarah's leg in their familiar gesture of mutual support. When that trust is broken, it can destroy lives. But when it's honored— She smiled, her judicial severity melting for a moment. It can heal even the deepest wounds. As the court began to clear, supporters came forward to congratulate Sarah. Luna accepted their gentle pats and kind words with graceful dignity, but she never strayed from Sarah's side. Dr. Martinez wrapped them both in a fierce hug, whispering, "You did it. You both did it." Outside the courthouse, the February sun had broken through Berlin's clouds, casting warm light over the city. Luna paused at the top of the steps, lifting her face to the sunshine in a gesture that seemed to embrace her newfound freedom. Sarah knelt beside her, not caring about her formal court attire. "Let's go home, Luna," she whispered. "Our home, forever." Luna's response was to gently touch her nose to Sarah's cheek, their special gesture that meant more than words ever could. As they descended the courthouse steps together, supporters and media gathered to document the moment, but Sarah and Luna were in their own world. They had fought their battle, won their victory, and now the real journey, their life together, could truly begin. The first night of Luna's official homecoming felt different from all their previous visits. There was a permanence in the air as Sarah unlocked her apartment door, a sense of finally that made even simple moments feel significant. Luna seemed to sense it too, padding through the familiar rooms with new purpose, as if truly claiming the space as her own for the first time. "Welcome home, sweet girl," Sarah said, her voice thick with emotion as she unclipped Luna's leash. The German shepherd made her usual inspection of the apartment, but this time there was a confidence in her movements that hadn't been there before. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. She paused at each of her designated spots: the window bed, the elevated food station, the memory foam bed beside Sarah's, as if confirming that everything was just as she remembered. The community had rallied around them in unexpected ways. Sarah's neighbors had decorated her door with a handmade "Welcome Home Luna" sign, complete with paw prints. Inside, she found her apartment had been prepared for their arrival. Someone had filled Luna's food and water bowls, left fresh flowers on the coffee table, and even placed a new toy basket filled with carefully chosen items suitable for a dog with Luna's special needs. Luna approached the basket with cautious interest, her nose working overtime as she investigated each item. She selected a soft, plush rabbit, similar to her favorite toy from their previous visits, and carried it carefully to her window bed. The simple act of a dog choosing a toy might seem ordinary to most, but Sarah knew what it meant. This was Luna feeling secure enough to play, to claim possessions, to believe they wouldn't be taken away. The evening unfolded in a series of quiet firsts. Their first dinner together as a permanent family, with Luna eating from her elevated bowls while Sarah sat cross-legged on the floor beside her, sharing the moment. Their first post-dinner walk as official partners, with Luna proudly wearing her new collar, a gentle padded one that bore a tag with her name and Sarah's contact information. The elderly residents of the neighborhood who had supported them throughout the court battle came out to their windows and balconies to wave and call out congratulations. Luna, who once would have shrunk from such attention, carried herself with quiet dignity, occasionally wagging her tail in response to familiar voices. Back home, Sarah established their evening routine. Luna's physical therapy exercises came first, But they felt different now, not just rehabilitation, but a commitment to maintaining her health for the life they would share. The German Shepherd worked through each movement with determined focus, her trust in Sarah evident in every careful stretch and strengthening exercise. As night fell, Sarah settled on the couch with her veterinary textbooks. Luna surprised her by hopping up beside her, something she'd never done before, and laying her head in Sarah's lap. The textbook was forgotten as Sarah stroked Luna's ears, marveling at how far they'd come from that desperate night in the snow. "You know what?" Sarah said softly. "I think we should celebrate." She went to the kitchen and returned with something she'd prepared specially, a dog-safe cake made with pumpkin and yogurt, decorated with a single candle. Luna watched with interest as Sarah set it on the coffee table. "To new beginnings," Sarah declared, and though Luna couldn't understand the words, she seemed to grasp the moment's importance. After Sarah blew out the candle, she offered Luna her portion on a special plate. The German Shepherd ate it delicately, cleaning every crumb, then looked up at Sarah with such pure contentment that it brought tears to her eyes. Later, as they prepared for bed, Luna did something unprecedented. Instead of going to her memory foam bed, she waited until Sarah was settled, then carefully climbed onto the bed beside her. She looked at Sarah questioningly, asking permission in her own way. "Of course you can stay," Sarah whispered, patting the space next to her. Luna settled down with a deep sigh of satisfaction, her body curled against Sarah's side. The trust implicit in this gesture, a formerly traumatized dog choosing to make herself vulnerable in sleep, spoke volumes about their journey together. As moonlight filtered through the bedroom window, Sarah listened to Luna's steady breathing and felt the gentle rise and fall of her chest. This was more than just a happy ending to their legal battle. It was the beginning of countless nights and days together, of a future filled with healing, trust, and unconditional love. The first night of Luna's official homecoming felt different. From all their previous visits, there was a permanence in the air as Sarah unlocked her apartment door, a sense of finally that made even simple moments feel significant. Luna seemed to sense it too, padding through the familiar rooms with new purpose, as if truly claiming the space as her own for the first time. "Welcome home, sweet girl," Sarah said, her voice thick with emotion as she unclipped Luna's leash. The German Shepherd made her usual inspection of the apartment, but this time there was a confidence in her movements that hadn't been there before. She paused at each of her designated spots, the window bed, the elevated food station, the memory foam bed beside Sarah's, as if confirming that everything was just as she remembered. The community had rallied around them in unexpected ways. Sarah's neighbors had decorated her door with a handmade "Welcome Home Luna" sign, complete with paw prints. Inside, she found her apartment had been prepared for their arrival. Someone had filled Luna's food and water bowls, left fresh flowers on the coffee table, and even placed a new toy basket filled with carefully chosen items suitable for a dog with Luna's special needs. Luna approached the basket with cautious interest, her nose working overtime as she investigated each item. She selected a soft, plush rabbit, similar to her favorite toy from their previous visits, and carried it carefully to her window bed. The simple act of a dog choosing a toy might seem ordinary to most, but Sarah knew what it meant. This was Luna feeling secure enough to play, to claim possessions, to believe they wouldn't be taken away. The evening unfolded in a series of quiet firsts. Their first dinner together as a permanent family, with Luna eating from her elevated bowls, while Sarah sat cross-legged on the floor beside her, sharing the moment. The first post-dinner walk as official partners, with Luna proudly wearing her new collar, a gentle, padded one that bore a tag with her name and Sarah's contact information. The elderly residents of the neighborhood who had supported them, throughout the court battle came out to their windows and balconies to wave and call out congratulations. Luna, who once would have shrunk from such attention, carried herself with quiet dignity, occasionally wagging her tail in response to familiar voices. Back home, Sarah established their evening routine. Luna's physical therapy exercises came first, but they felt different now, not just rehabilitation, but a commitment to maintaining her health for the life they would share. The German Shepherd worked through each movement with determined focus, her trust in Sarah evident in every careful stretch and strengthening exercise. As night fell, Sarah settled on the couch with her veterinary textbooks. Luna surprised her by hopping up beside her, something she'd never done before, and laying her head in Sarah's lap. The textbook was forgotten as Sarah stroked Luna's ears, marveling at how far they'd come from that desperate night in the snow. "You know what?" Sarah said softly. "I think we should celebrate." She went to the kitchen and returned with something she'd prepared specially, a dog-safe cake, made with pumpkin and yogurt, decorated with a single candle. Luna watched with interest as Sarah set it on the coffee table. "To new beginnings," Sarah declared, and though Luna couldn't understand the words, she seemed to grasp the moment's importance. After Sarah blew out the candle, she offered Luna her portion on a special plate. The German Shepherd ate it delicately, cleaning every crumb, then looked up at Sarah with such pure contentment that it brought tears to her eyes. Later, as they prepared for bed, Luna did something unprecedented. Instead of going to her memory foam bed, she waited until Sarah was settled, then carefully climbed onto the bed beside her. She looked at Sarah questioningly, asking permission in her own way. "Of course you can stay," Sarah whispered, patting the space next to her. Luna settled down with a deep sigh of satisfaction, her body curled against Sarah's side. The trust implicit in this gesture, a formerly traumatized dog choosing to make herself vulnerable in sleep, spoke volumes about their journey together. As moonlight filtered through the bedroom window, Sarah listened to Luna's steady breathing and felt the gentle rise and fall of her chest. This was more than just a happy ending to their legal battle. It was the beginning of countless nights and days together, of a future filled with healing, trust, and unconditional love. Spring arrived in Berlin, bringing with it new beginnings for Luna and Sarah. As the city shed its winter coat, their daily routines had evolved into a comfortable rhythm that seemed to heal them both. Each morning began with Luna gently nudging. Sarah awake, no alarm clock needed. A far cry from the terrified dog who once flinched at every sudden movement. Sarah had arranged her veterinary studies schedule to maximize their time together, and Dr. Martinez had offered her a permanent position at the clinic, understanding that Luna's presence had a calming effect on other traumatized animals. The German Shepherd had developed an uncanny ability to sense which patients needed comfort, often lying quietly near their cages or offering a gentle nuzzle to a frightened puppy. "She's becoming a therapy dog in her own right," Dr. Martinez observed one morning, watching as Luna's presence helped calm a nervous rescue cat. "Her empathy for other animals is remarkable. The transformation from victim to healer was perhaps the most beautiful aspect of Luna's recovery." Their morning walks had become a neighborhood institution. Luna, now strong enough for longer excursions, proudly carried her own water bottle in a special harness. They had their regular stops, the bakery where the owner always saved a dog safe, Treat, the park where Luna had made her first canine friend, and the retirement home where elderly residents waited with biscuits and gentle words. One particularly meaningful morning, they passed the industrial district where Luna had been found. Sarah had been apprehensive about taking this route, but Luna showed no fear. Instead, she walked with quiet dignity past the spot, then turned to look at Sarah as if to say, "That's behind us now." They never avoided the area after that. It became simply another part of their story, a reminder of how far they'd come. Luna's physical therapy continued, but now it was more about maintenance than rehabilitation. Her injured leg would never be perfect, but she had adapted remarkably. Sarah had discovered that Luna loved swimming, and they'd found a pet-friendly pool where the water's buoyancy helped strengthen her muscles without strain. The sight of Luna paddling confidently across the pool, her face bright with joy, never failed to move Sarah to tears. Their home had evolved too. Luna had gradually claimed more spaces as her own, a sunny spot by the kitchen window for morning naps, a corner of the couch for evening cuddles, and most surprisingly, a desk area next to Sarah's study space. She would lie there for hours, while Sarah worked on her veterinary assignments, occasionally placing a paw on her human's knee, as if offering encouragement. The turning point in Luna's emotional healing came unexpectedly. During one of their evening walks, they encountered a car backfiring, a sound that would have once sent Luna into a panic. Instead, she startled briefly but then looked to Sarah for reassurance. When Sarah remained calm, Luna relaxed, trusting her human's judgment that they were safe. This simple moment of shared confidence marked how far their bond had come. Their evenings had developed their own special rhythm. After dinner and exercises, they would often sit together on their small balcony, watching the city lights come on. Luna had her own cushioned bed out there, but she preferred to lean against Sarah's legs, sharing the peaceful moment together. Sometimes Sarah would read aloud from her textbooks, and Luna would listen with perked ears, as if genuinely interested. In learning about veterinary medicine, the most significant change was in Luna's eyes. The fear and uncertainty that had once clouded them had been replaced by a steady, confident glow. She still had her moments, occasional nightmares that would wake them both, times when a sudden movement would make her jump, but recovery wasn't about erasing the past. It was about building a present and future strong enough to carry it. One evening, as they sat enjoying the spring breeze, Sarah received an email that brought tears to her eyes. The Berlin Animal Welfare Court wanted to feature Luna's story in their educational programs. Her journey from abandoned victim to thriving therapy dog would help change how cases of animal neglect were handled. Luna, sensing Sarah's emotion, lifted her head and offered one of her gentle nose touches, their special gesture that meant everything was going to be all right. "Look what you've done," Sarah whispered, scratching behind Luna's ears. "You're not just healing yourself, you're helping change things for other animals too." Luna's tail wagged gently, her eyes fixed on Sarah with that deep understanding that had become the foundation of their bond. Together, they were writing a new chapter, not just in their own lives, but in the story of how society treats its most vulnerable animals. Word of Luna's transformation spread through Berlin's animal welfare community, turning their story into a beacon of hope for other rescue cases. Dr. Martinez's clinic had become a preferred destination for particularly challenging cases, with Luna serving as an unofficial ambassador of healing. Her gentle presence had a way of reaching even the most traumatized animals in ways that humans couldn't. The most remarkable example came with the arrival of Max, a severely abused German Shepherd mix who refused to let anyone near him. The dog had been found chained in an abandoned building, his trust in humans completely shattered. Traditional approaches had failed, and he was at risk of being deemed unadoptable. "Let's try something different," Dr. Martinez suggested one morning, watching as Luna went about her usual rounds of greeting the clinic's patients. Sarah nodded, understanding immediately. Under careful supervision, they allowed Luna to approach Max's kennel at her own pace. What followed was a masterclass in canine communication. Luna lay down at a respectful distance, making herself non-threatening while maintaining steady, calm energy. For hours, she simply existed in Max's space, occasionally glancing his way, but never demanding interaction. By the end of the day, Max had moved closer to the front of his kennel, his body language softening ever so slightly. Over the next few days, Luna's patience began to pay off. Max started mirroring her calm behavior, and when Luna would accept treats gently from Sarah's hand, he watched with increasing interest. It was as if Luna was teaching him that humans could be trusted, showing him through example that love and kindness were possible. "She remembers," Sarah whispered to Dr. Martinez, watching Luna's careful interactions with Max. "She knows exactly what he's feeling because she's been there herself." The older veterinarian nodded, her eyes misty as she observed their gentle dance of healing. Luna's influence extended beyond the clinic. The Berlin Animal Welfare Court had implemented a new program where Luna and Sarah visited schools, teaching children about animal empathy and responsible pet ownership. Luna's story, complete with before and after photos, never failed to move her audience, but it was her present-day demeanor, gentle, dignified, and obviously adoring of Sarah, that made the strongest impression. During one such presentation, a young girl raised her hand. "Wasn't it hard to trust again after being hurt so badly?" she asked, her question directed at Luna as if the dog could answer. Sarah knelt beside Luna, who sat calmly despite the room full of children. "Luna taught me something important about trust," Sarah answered, scratching Luna's favorite spot, behind her ears. "It's not about forgetting the hurt, it's about being brave enough to try again." Luna chose to trust, even when she had every reason not to. That's what makes her so special. The impact of their story rippled outward in unexpected ways. Several local shelters reported an increase in adoptions of older and special needs dogs. Luna's journey had shown people that every animal deserved a chance, regardless of their past or physical limitations. Her weekly swimming sessions at the pet pool had inspired the facility to start a rehabilitation program for other dogs with mobility issues. One of the most touching developments came from the industrial district where Luna had been found. The workers there, led by Carl, had established a volunteer patrol to watch for abandoned animals. They called it Luna's Watch, and thanks to their vigilance, several other dumped pets had been rescued before it was too late. Luna took all this attention in stride, maintaining her gentle dignity, whether she was helping a frightened clinic, patient, or demonstrating patience to a group of schoolchildren. But she was always happiest during quiet moments with Sarah, when they could simply be together without any expectations. One evening, after a particularly successful day where Max had finally allowed a human to touch him, Sarah and Luna sat in their favorite spot on the balcony. Luna rested her head in Sarah's lap, her eyes reflecting the setting sun. A light breeze carried the sense of spring, and somewhere in the distance, church bells rang. "You know what Dr. Martinez said today?" Sarah spoke softly, running her fingers through Luna's fur. "She said that sometimes the ones who have been hurt the most have the most love to give. She was talking about you, sweet girl." Luna's tail wagged gently at the sound of Sarah's voice. Above them, stars began to appear in the darkening sky, and the city settled into its evening rhythm. They had come so far from that desperate night in the snow, yet in many ways their journey was just beginning. Every animal Luna helped, every person she touched with her story, was a new chapter in their ongoing tale of healing and hope. The Berlin City Hall's grand chamber was filled to capacity on a warm summer morning. Sunlight streamed through tall windows, casting golden light across the assembled crowd of animal welfare advocates, veterinarians, rescue workers, and supporters. At the center of it all sat Luna, poised and calm beside Sarah, wearing a special blue therapy dog vest that had been custom-made to accommodate her old injury. The occasion was the announcement of the Luna's Law Initiative, a comprehensive reform of animal welfare regulations inspired by their story. The proposed legislation would strengthen penalties for animal abandonment, increase funding for rehabilitation programs, and establish a special division of the police force dedicated to investigating animal cruelty cases. Mayor Fisher approached the podium, her voice carrying across the hushed chamber. Sometimes it takes one story to open our eyes to a larger truth. Luna's journey from abandonment to becoming a healing presence in our community has shown us what is possible when we choose compassion over indifference. As the mayor spoke, Luna's attention remained focused on Sarah, occasionally pressing against her leg in their familiar gesture of mutual support. She had come so far from the terrified dog in the snow, yet maintained a humility that touched everyone who met her. Today, the mayor continued, we are not just announcing new legislation. We are recognizing that animals in our care are not mere property, but beings capable of both suffering and remarkable resilience. Luna's story has shown us this truth in the most profound way. Dr. Martinez was called to speak next, presenting data on how Luna's presence at the clinic had improved recovery rates for traumatized animals. What we've witnessed goes beyond ordinary rehabilitation, she explained. Luna has developed an intuitive ability to connect with animals who have lost trust in the world. She shows them, through her own example, that healing is possible. The presentation included videos of Luna's work, her gentle approach to frightened animals, her patience with injured pets during physical therapy sessions, her calm presence during educational programs. But perhaps most moving was the testimony from Carl and other industrial district workers about Luna's watch and the animals they'd managed to save. Before Luna, Carl said, his voice rough with emotion, we didn't know what to do when we saw abandoned animals. Now we have a protocol, a purpose. Every life we save honors her story. Sarah was asked to speak last. As she rose, Luna stayed, perfectly at her side, climbing the steps to the podium with graceful determination despite her old injury. The chamber fell silent, many wiping tears as they watched this living testament to the power of love and second chances. Luna was not just a dog I rescued, Sarah began, one hand resting gently on Luna's head. She rescued me too, showing me that the deepest wounds can heal with enough patience and love. Every day, she chooses to trust, to love, to help others despite her own past trauma. She's taught me that our painful experiences don't have to define us. They can inspire us to prevent others from suffering the same fate. As if understanding the gravity of the moment, Luna sat tall beside Sarah, her gentle eyes scanning the crowd without fear. Several people who had been involved in her journey were present. The behaviorist who had documented her recovery, Frau Weber from Animal Welfare, even some of the elderly residents from their neighborhood who had supported them during the court battle. The mayor returned to the podium, this time holding something in her hands. In recognition of her extraordinary service to our community, we are honoring Luna with Berlin's first Animal Welfare Ambassador Medal. She carefully draped the special collar medallion around Luna's neck. Luna accepted it with characteristic grace, then looked up at Sarah as if to share the moment with her person. But the true impact of their story was evident in the announcement that followed. The city had approved funding for a new animal rehabilitation center to be named Luna's Haven. The facility would specialize in cases like Luna's, animals, who needed extensive physical and emotional rehabilitation. It would include a training program for therapy dogs, with Luna and Sarah as special advisors. As the ceremony concluded, supporters came forward to congratulate them. Luna greeted each person calmly, her inherent gentleness touching hearts just as it had since her recovery. Yet amid all the attention and acclaim, she remained most attuned to Sarah, their bond evident in every shared glance and subtle interaction. Later, as they walked home through the park, Luna wore her new medallion with the same quiet dignity she brought to everything. She stopped to greet a frightened rescue dog, demonstrating the gentle patience that had become her trademark. Did-did-do. Other dog's owner watched in amazement as their usually fearful pet responded to Luna's calm energy. "You see," Sarah said softly, watching the interaction, "every day, in your own way, you're changing the world." Luna looked up at her, eyes bright with trust and love, then continued their walk home. Two souls who had healed each other, now helping to heal others. Luna's haven opened its doors on a crisp autumn morning, transformed from an abandoned warehouse into a state-of-the-art rehabilitation center. The building stood as a testament to hope, its walls painted in soothing colors and its grounds converted into secure exercise areas and healing gardens. Above the entrance, a beautiful mural depicted Luna's journey from rescue to recovery, serving as an inspiration to all who entered. Sarah and Luna arrived early that first morning, before the official opening ceremony. They walked through the quiet halls together, Luna's paws clicking softly on the specially designed non-slip flooring. The facility had been carefully planned to accommodate animals with various physical challenges, incorporating features inspired by Luna's own rehabilitation journey. "What do you think, sweet girl?" Sarah asked, as they explored the hydrotherapy room, complete with a pool similar to the one where Luna had strengthened her injured leg. Luna approached the water's edge with familiar interest, her tail wagging as she remembered her own healing journey. The rehabilitation center included features they'd dreamed of during Luna's recovery: heated floors for arthritic patients, cushioned exercise areas, and specially designed quiet spaces for traumatized animals. Each detail had been carefully considered, from the height of the feeding stations to the gentle lighting system that could be adjusted for sensitive eyes. As the staff began to arrive, a carefully selected team of veterinarians, behaviorists, and animal care specialists, Luna greeted each one with her characteristic gentle dignity. Many had been specifically chosen because of their experience with traumatized animals, and all had been trained in the patient, loving approach that had worked so well in Luna's case. The first residents arrived shortly after the ribbon-cutting ceremony. Among them was Maya, a Belgian Malinois who had been rescued from a similar situation to Luna's. Like Luna once had, Maya carried both physical and emotional scars from her ordeal. She cowered at the back of her specially designed suite, watching everything with suspicious eyes. Luna's approach to Maya demonstrated everything they hoped to teach at the Haven. She settled quietly nearby, not making direct eye contact but maintaining a calm, reassuring presence. Sarah watched with pride as Luna recreated the patient process that had helped her own healing, showing Maya that she understood her fear. Throughout that first day, Luna moved between the new residents, seeming to know exactly who needed her attention most. She lay near a frightened puppy mill survivor, sharing her peaceful energy. She demonstrated the hydrotherapy pool's safety to a hesitant dog with injured legs. Each interaction showed how far she had come from her own traumatic past. The most touching moment came during the afternoon quiet time. Sarah was reviewing care plans when she heard soft whimpering from Maya's suite. She found Luna already there, lying just outside the glass door. Maya had moved closer, drawn by Luna's gentle presence. Both dogs lay with only the door between them, sharing a silent understanding that brought tears to Sarah's eyes. "You're showing them the way," Sarah whispered to Luna later, as they took a break in their private office. The room was decorated, with photos of their journey together, including that first night at Dr. Martinez's clinic. Luna rested her head in Sarah's lap, her eyes wise and gentle. Though she now spent her days helping others, her deepest bond remained with Sarah. As evening approached, they made final rounds together. Each resident received a gentle check-in, with Luna offering her own form of comfort to complement the medical care. The staff watched in amazement as animals who had been unresponsive to human contact began showing subtle signs of interest in Luna's presence. In the Haven's garden, designed with peaceful corners and security in mind, Sarah and Luna paused to watch the sunset. The facility represented everything they had learned about healing, not just the physical aspects, but the emotional journey from trauma to trust. Luna's medallion caught the fading light as she surveyed what had once been just a dream. A soft whine from inside caught their attention. Maya had ventured out of her suite and was watching them through the garden doors. Luna looked at Sarah, asking permission in her own way, then walked back inside to sit with her new friend. Sarah watched as Maya gradually relaxed in Luna's presence, taking the first tiny steps toward trust. "You're writing new stories now," Sarah said softly, observing the interaction. "Every animal who comes through these doors will learn from your journey." Luna's tail wagged gently as she continued her quiet communion with Maya, showing through her own example that healing was possible, that trust could be rebuilt, that love was still available even after the deepest trauma. As night fell over, Luna's haven, lights dimmed automatically to create a calming environment for the residents. Sarah and Luna made one final round, ensuring every animal felt secure in their new sanctuary. The building hummed with quiet purpose, a place of healing, of second chances, of hope restored. It was Luna's legacy made real, a testament to the transformative power of patience, understanding, and unconditional love. 1 year to the day after Luna was found in the snow, Sarah stood in the garden of Luna's haven, watching as the German shepherd conducted her morning rounds. The transformation from that desperate night to this moment still filled her with wonder. Luna moved with quiet grace among the haven's residents, her slight limp now just another part of who she was, a reminder of the journey that had brought them here. The haven had become more successful than anyone could have imagined. Over 100 animals had passed through its doors, each one touched by Luna's gentle wisdom. Maya, their first resident, had been adopted by a loving family the previous week. Before leaving, she had pressed her nose against Luna's in farewell, two survivors, sharing a moment of understanding that moved everyone who witnessed it. Luna's law had been officially passed, its effects rippling through the community. Abandonment cases had dropped significantly, and the Luna's Watch program had spread to other districts, creating a network of vigilant guardians for vulnerable animals. But perhaps most importantly, the way people viewed animal rehabilitation had fundamentally changed. Sarah watched as Luna approached their newest arrival, a scarred German shepherd who had been rescued from conditions horrifyingly similar to Luna's past. The dog, named Hope by the rescue team, showed all the fear and distrust that Luna had once carried. But Luna knew exactly what to do, settling nearby with the patience of one who had walked this path before. "She remembers everything, doesn't she?" Dr. Martinez said softly, joining Sarah in the garden. The older veterinarian had become a regular consultant at the Haven, her expertise helping to shape their rehabilitation programs. Not just the trauma, but the healing process too. She knows exactly what they need because she's been there herself. As if hearing them, Luna looked up from her quiet communion with Hope, her eyes meeting Sarah's with that deep understanding that had become the foundation of their bond. In that gaze was everything they had been through together. The desperate night of rescue, the long hours of rehabilitation, the court battle, and all the quiet moments of healing in between. The garden had become Luna's favorite place to work with nervous newcomers. Here, surrounded by nature and gentle sounds, even the most traumatized animals began to find peace. Sarah had designed it with everything they'd learned in mind: protected spaces where scared animals could feel secure, gentle water features that provided soothing background noise, and carefully chosen plants that offered natural calming. sense. Later that afternoon, as the sun began to set, Sarah gathered the haven's staff and residents for a small ceremony. It had become their tradition to mark successful adoptions by adding a stone to the path of hope, a winding walkway, where each stone represented an animal who had found their forever home. Today, they were adding Maya's stone. Luna sat beside Sarah as she addressed the group, her presence a living testament to the power of second chances. "Every stone on this path tells a story," Sarah began, her hand resting gently on Luna's head. "But none of them would be here if it wasn't for Luna. She showed us that the deepest wounds can heal, that trust can be rebuilt, and that love never gives up." As she spoke, Hope emerged cautiously from her protected corner, drawn by Luna's calm energy. The gathered staff held their breath as the scarred shepherd took hesitant steps toward the group. Luna remained perfectly still, offering the same patient understanding that Sarah had once shown her. When Hope finally settled nearby, not touching but present, tears of joy ran down many faces. That evening, as they prepared to head home, Sarah and Luna took one final walk through the haven. The facility had grown to include a training center, where other therapy dogs learned Luna's gentle methods, a veterinary clinic specializing in rehabilitation, and a community education center where Luna's story inspired countless visitors to choose adoption. In their private office, Sarah paused by the wall of photographs that documented their journey. There was Luna on that first night, broken but not defeated. Luna taking her first steps in physical therapy. Luna at the court, hearing that changed. Both their lives, Luna receiving her therapy dog certification. Each image told part of their story, but Sarah's favorite was a simple photo of Luna sleeping peacefully in their first night at home, the moment when healing truly began. As they left the haven, the setting sun painted the sky in shades of gold and pink. Luna paused at the gate, looking back at the building that bore her name. In the growing dusk, Hope watched them from her window, her eyes holding the same spark of possibility that Luna had once shown. "You've changed so many lives," Sarah whispered, kneeling beside her beloved companion, "including mine." Luna pressed her forehead against Sarah's, their special gesture that meant more than words ever could. In that touch was everything they had become to each other, rescuer and rescued, healer and healed, two souls who had found their purpose in helping others find their way home. As they walked home together through the gentle Berlin evening, their shadows merged into one on the peaceful streets. Behind them, Luna's haven stood as a beacon of hope, its lights warming the gathering darkness. And in windows throughout the city, other rescued animals slept peacefully in their forever homes, their own stories of healing inspired by a German shepherd who had shown that love could light the way back from the coldest night. Up next, you got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out, and don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.